Members, before our debate begins, the chair will make a statement about the decorum expected in the chamber. Disciplinary matters, by their very nature, involve personalities. Proper consideration of an expulsion resolution requires the House to admit references in debate to the conduct of the member being disciplined. This very narrow exception to the general rule against engaging in personalities allows references to a member's conduct when that conduct is the exact question the House is considering. While a wide range of discussion is permitted during debate on a disciplinary resolution, the use of personally abusive language is not allowed. Indecent language that is profane, vulgar, or obscene is also out of order. On the question to be laid before the House momentarily, members must confine their remarks to the merits of the question of whether or not the member should be expelled. Members may not make remarks that constitute personalities with respect to the members on the Committee of General Investigating or other current members whose conduct is not subject of the resolution. The chair expects members will cooperate in maintaining a level of decorum that preserves the dignity of the Texas House and its proceedings. As always, the gallery will abstain from expression of approval or disapproval of today's proceedings. For orderly debate and without objection, equal time will be allowed to both sides. Hearing no objection, so ordered. Finally, under Rule 5, Section 38, a member speaking on the resolution may not be interrupted by another member for any purpose. All points of order must be submitted in writing to the chair. The chair recognizes Mr. Murr.
Mr. Speaker, I call up the privileged resolution H.R. 1542, expelling Representative Bryan Slaton of Hunt County from the Texas House of Representatives of the 88th Legislature.
The chair lays out H.R. 1542. The clerk read the resolution in full.
H.R. 1542 by Murr, A. Johnson of Harris, Guerin, Longoria, Spiller. Be it resolved that pursuant to Section 11, Article 3, Texas Constitution, Representative Bryan Slaton of Hunt County be and is hereby expelled from the Texas House of Representatives of the 88th Legislature of the State of Texas.
The chair recognizes Mr. Murr to explain the resolution.
Mr. Speaker, members, the entire committee will participate in the process of the explanation of this resolution.
The chair recognizes Mr. Guerin to explain the resolution.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. Stories have surfaced of inappropriate conduct by members of the Texas Legislature and concerns for staff safety at the Texas Capitol. In response, a work group was established by then Speaker Joe Straus in 2017. I had the privilege of serving as chair of House Administration, and we created a subcommittee to begin this work. Representative Donna Howard, Representative Linda Coop co-chaired a 10-member bipartisan committee of representatives. Rule 15, Article 9 of the Housekeeping Resolution and recent amendments to the House Personnel Manual are the direct result of our work group on the House Sexual Harassment Policy. Rule 15 is unequivocal. All forms of harassment prohibited by law are against the policy of the House. Moreover, members, officers, employees of the House are expected to promote public confidence in the integrity by conducting themselves in a manner that is free of harassment in each setting related to the service of the member, officer, or employee, and by reporting any harassment in the workplace for which they have direct personal knowledge. Rule 15 is the policy on which this House relies for guidance in promoting appropriate workplace conduct. The House Personnel Manual is likewise unequivocal. The House of Representatives is committed to creating and maintaining a work environment in which all individuals are treated with dignity, decency, and respect. Discrimination, harassment of any kind, including sexual harassment, and other forms of inappropriate workplace conduct are unacceptable and will not be tolerated. Members, officers, employees are expected to abstain from and discourage discrimination, harassment, and other forms of inappropriate workplace conduct. And by enforcement of this policy and by the training of all members, officers, employees, and the House will seek to prevent, correct, and discipline behavior that violates this policy. With the support of 3 consecutive speakers, Speaker Joe Strauss, Speaker Dennis Bonnen, Speaker Dade Phelan, the Committee on House Administration, the Committee on General Investigating, and the full House have adopted and readopted these rules in 2019, 21, and 23. Until now, we have not had a formal complaint of sexual harassment since 2011. However, we determined in case a complaint was filed against a member of the House, that an independent investigator would be appointed to avoid potential conflicts among memberships and how an investigation may influence our shared legislative work and obligations. In a valid complaint of sexual harassment, we may take prompt and effective remedial action in order to end the problem. To ensure fairness, we decided the best course would be to appoint an independent investigator to conduct interviews and submit a report to assist the General Investigating Committee in determining findings and fact and conclusions of law. We all remember earlier this session completing our mandatory for all House members and employees in-person discrimination prevention and workplace conduct training. Bryan Slaton completed his on February 7th, 2023. I was there when we started our work to ensure everyone in this building has a safe working environment. We cannot ensure we won't have someone try to do something again. But today, we can ensure that this process, that we all know, we will have their back. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The chair recognizes Mr. Longoria.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. I'm here today to provide a procedural overview of the House General Investigating Committee's recent investigation into complaints against Mr. Slaton. The committee followed the rules outlined in House General Investigating Committee rules, specifically investigation and resolution of complaints related to appropriate workplace conduct and Article 9, appropriate workplace conduct found in our housekeeping resolutions. 3 complaints were filed regarding Mr. Slaton, and all complaints contained the signatures by the complaining parties attesting to the veracity of the allegations subject to the penalty of perjury. Specifically, the complaints were received as follows. Complaint 1, on Wednesday, April 5th, a complaint was emailed to General Investigating. On April 10th, the same complaint was filed formally in written form in accordance with Article 9.03 of the Housekeeping Resolutions for the Texas House of Representatives. Complaint 2, on Wednesday, April 5th, a complaint was emailed to General Investigating, and on April 20th, the same complaint was filed formally in written form in accordance with Article 9.03 of Housekeeping Resolutions for the Texas House of Representatives. Complaint 3, on April 11th, the complaint was filed formally in accordance with 9.03 of Housekeeping Resolutions for the Texas House of Representatives. The respondent was served with all complaints on April 20th and the 21st. The committee proceeded with an investigation pursuant to Article 9 of the Housekeeping Resolutions in accordance with Article 9, Section 9.03F, and retained an independent investigator to conduct an independent report to submit to the committee. Judge Catherine Evans was selected. All individuals who filed complaints were interviewed by Judge Evans and had counsel with them. Furthermore, many witnesses referenced in the complaints met with Judge Evans and had legal counsel present. A detailed report was provided to the committee on May 1st, 2023. After the facts were reviewed by the committee pursuant to April 9th, the committee determined that reasonable cause existed that Mr. Slaton violated House rules. The respondent was afforded a due process hearing on Thursday, May 4th, 2023. The respondent appeared and had legal counsel. A confidential hearing was conducted pursuant to the rules, and upon conclusion of that hearing, a report containing findings of facts and conclusions of law was prepared in accordance with Committee Rule 11. The report was unanimously adopted by record vote. The committee followed the procedures outlined in Rule 11 of the committee rules, and the committee unanimously recommends expulsion.
The chair recognizes Mr. Spiller.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, pursuant to the committee rules of the House General Investigating Committee governing the filing, investigation, and resolution of complaints, upon the review of an investigative report to determine whether there is reasonable cause to believe that a respondent has engaged in inappropriate conduct, and upon a finding that there is reasonable cause to believe that the respondent engaged in inappropriate conduct, a due process hearing is scheduled and conducted. After the due process hearing is held, the committee determines whether the respondent violated a rule or policy as alleged in one or more complaints. The committee is required to prepare a report containing the committee's findings of fact and conclusions of law to support its final determination. In this case, that process has been meticulously followed, and the report of the Committee on General Investigating in the matter of Representative Bryan L. Slaton has been provided to you. While each of you has received, read, and considered the report, it is in the consideration of this resolution that a general presentation of the basic pertinent facts be provided to you. The detailed facts are contained in the report. They're unpleasant, they're graphic, they're offensive. They make us uncomfortable. But the detailed facts are nonetheless relevant and germane to the consideration of this resolution. The concise summary of the facts contained in the report is as follows. On March 31st through April 1st, 2023, Representative Slaton provided excessive amounts of alcohol to a 19-year-old female legislative aide from his Capitol office, over whom he had the primary responsibility for overseeing and who was unable to give effective consent. He took advantage of her intoxication and had sexual intercourse with her. The facts relating to this event are detailed and graphic and are contained in paragraphs 26 through 38 of the report. Further, Representative Slaton clearly maintained an inappropriate relationship with the 19-year-old female staffer from his Capitol office. On multiple occasions after January 10th, 2023, Representative Slaton offered and provided alcohol to underage females, both of whom were 19 years of age, who Representative Slaton knew to be minors for purposes of the alcoholic beverage laws of this state. On or after April 1st, 2023, Representative Slaton engaged in harassment prohibited by law by showing a purportedly concocted email and threatening and attempting to prevent those with direct knowledge of the facts surrounding the inappropriate sexual intercourse and relationship with the 19-year-old staffer from his Capitol office from speaking to anyone about what they knew. The female staffers involved were panicked, were in fear of retaliation, in fear of losing their jobs, and in fear of their futures. The facts relating to this event are detailed and contained in paragraphs 39 through 46 of the report. Further, Representative Slaton violated House rules by failing to report the harassment initiated by himself in the workplace of which he had direct personal knowledge. He also violated House rules by failing to abstain from harassment and other forms of inappropriate workplace conduct. All of the facts alleged in the report are completely undisputed by Representative Slaton or by anyone else. It's also undisputed that Representative Slaton did not express any regret or remorse for his conduct to the General Investigating Committee, and I'm further unaware of Representative Slaton publicly expressing any regret or remorse for his conduct. Thank you.
The chair recognizes Ms. Johnson of Harris.
the other day after we did our findings of fact and recommendation of expulsion in the matter of Bryan Slaton. And they said to me, "You look sad." I am. What we have heard about and dealt with is not what I know of this body. My dad served in the legislature before I was born, and many of my parents' closest friends are the people that they met here in this building. Many of those people I still consider to this day part of my family. I grew up knowing and watching elected officials, public servants. I grew up in attending political events, community barbecues, sunny day parties. In college, I twice served as a young legislative house staffer during sessions. I recall the many county day parties, the people that I met, the new friends that I made, and the fun that I had with people who were my age. I got to see how good people made law. And I got to experience as a staffer how those unfortunate Texans who called as our constituents could be helped by all of us who worked in our offices, that we all were engaging in public service. And I loved it. I had an amazing experience. And I think of the many mentors that I had here who created in me the foundation that makes me humble to have the opportunity to sit in these and to work at these desks. I am sad because the staffers that are contained in this report have had the most polar, opposite experience of this building from what I had. Rather than what our offices can be done to show of support for all Texans, these staffers have learned how offices can be manipulated to benefit a few. I've sat in my desk this session and I looked up and I looked around at how this room is probably exactly the same as when my parents were here in the 60s. My parents met and fell in love here. My dad was a state representative from Houston, sitting somewhere about midway over on this right side, and my mom was a reporter for the Dallas Morning News. I have heard the story 1,000 times. My dad went to look for the reporter that had written an article about one of his bills. He was going to find them and tell them how wrong they were. He said he took one look at my mom and said, "You were right." And they were married happily for 49 years until my dad's death. We are not here because two consenting adults met and fell in love in the Texas house. We are here because a 45-year-old member took advantage of and abused his power over his subordinate teenage staffer. It started with slipping an underage girl some drink coins so that she could have her first real capital drink. How many of us would do that with our teenage staff? It's taking photos of her and having her take photos of him, remarking of how she looks nice and remarking on her features. How many of us would do that with our teenage staff? It's sitting with her on the bus to the football game, slipping her more drinks, spending time alone with her together to the point that others start to notice and ask questions. How many of us would do that with our teenage staff? It's creating the habit of calling in the evenings to talk and tell of the problems you're having with your wife. How many of us would do that with your teenage staff? Individually, these moments could be dismissed or even explained away, but collectively, they show a systematic pattern of manipulation. While his young family waited at home, Mr. Slaton claimed to need to stay in town. The rest of us had recessed the day before. It's now Friday night, March 31st, and around 10 p.m., he begins calling that same teenage staffer who is out with other friends. The others can hear the voice on the phone, and they know that that is Representative Bryan Slaton. He calls repeatedly for hours and says, "Hey, come over, have some drinks." Her friends warn her, a guy calling you like this late at night, this is sexual. So if she wanted to do it, why not just show up by herself? She didn't. When they get there, Bryan Slaton is surprised that she's brought others. Yet he continues, as we will later learn, maybe because he, quote, fears no one, and he, quote, has no worries that he's going to lose his job. He makes tall Yeti cups full of rum and Coke. His teenage staffer takes a drink and says out loud, "Too strong." He takes it, drinks a little off the top, pours more Coke, and gives it back to her. He continues to pour and refill her cup. His teenage staffer recalls, quote, a lot of alcohol, that she felt, quote, pretty rough, quote, really dizzy, and had, quote, split vision. They witness Slaton's behavior with his teenage staffer, and others remark that it is close and appears intimate. By 2 a.m., they were repeatedly trying to convince her to leave. Imagine that. 3 young adults who are trying their best to persuade Bryan Slaton from committing what can at best be described as sexual stupidity and at worst, sexual violence. His response? She doesn't have to go if she don't want to. What happens next, by all accounts, is uncontroverted. They have sex. There weren't just 2 people who knew. She told someone, and he told someone. In violation of all of our rules, Bryan Slaton had sexual intercourse with a teenage staffer, and then when he realized he was about to get caught, he came up with a plan and tried to cover it up. Remember that phrase, I'm not afraid of anyone else, but you own me now, and starts asking her if her friends can be trusted. He pressures the girls with a probably phony email to a point where they feel threatened. One is seen crying at her desk, and they are terrified and stay up all night trying to figure out what to do. You see, these kids actually really liked Bryan Slaton. They really looked up to him. They thought he was brave. But at some point, they say, enough, this has gone too far, and you have to speak with your members. Representative 1, Representative 2, Representative 3, and Representative 4. Thank you for coming to this committee and entrusting us to begin our work. In response to the rumors that are going about, it is one of us, one of the members of this chamber, that calls him, and he confesses. He says, yes, he did the thing everybody is talking about, but hey, just keep it quiet. Stay with me, I have a plan. So what's Bryan Slaton's plan? He stays in touch with his teenage staffer. He tells her not to come to work, that he too will be gone. He instructs her to stay home and stay calm. And she complies. She believes that she loves him. To this day, she is unwilling to speak about what might hurt him most. Let us be clear, we do not fault this teenage staffer. Ultimately, she does not deny what has been said before, nor does she deny what the others say they saw, they heard, and what she told them. What concerns us is she refuses to speak to the investigation about what happened in that apartment after her friends left. Again, we do not fault her, but we question consent. We have grave concerns about her level of intoxication and her statement to others that she would not have done it but for the fact that she was overserved. We have concerns no one will speak freely. At one point, she says that he is flirting with her and he is kissing her in the office, our little extension offices. As many of you know, 6 people in and out of there, don't you wonder what the others in the office saw? This committee was created by you for us to ask those very questions in this very situation with a legitimate complaint filed under penalty. And in this case, we had 3. We all, like you, noticed Bryan Slaton's body language. At first, he wasn't here. Then he was here in sullen. And then all of a sudden, he seemed to return an air of confidence and a skip in his step. Was it because he got to her? Did she finally confirm, I won't talk about the thing that could hurt you most? We are equally disturbed by his entire office refusing to cooperate in violation of our rules with this investigation. Did he get excited when someone said, oh, don't worry, we won't let them talk? We don't know. What we do know is that every other staffer, every other witness, every other representative was able to coordinate with the investigator, find time to sit down, find an opportunity to get to the discrete location, which was confidentially being done, with a video running, gave a full statement with lawyers present for those that wanted them. Everybody, except for the people associated with Bryan Slaton. As an employer in the state of Texas, we, like all others, upon a credible report of sexual harassment, must take prompt and effective remedial action to put an end to the problem. It is impossible for us to ignore the large imbalance of power between the two and his providing alcohol to her to get her into compliance and then continuing to manipulate and attempt to delay in order to cover this up. It is important for us to make sure that the young adults who found themselves in his apartment at Bryan Slaton making, you never were and are not the problem. He is. Our report shows that Bryan Slaton violated various provisions of our house rules and various Texas laws. And now we have seen Bryan Slaton's resignation letter. We can see where the machine will go next. He's not going to play the reformed man who's atoning for his sins. He's all of a sudden remembered that he has that young family back at home. He doesn't even acknowledge the teenage staffer exists. Now that the report has been released and it has become public, she is of no benefit to him. She goes from special to discarded. In my legal work, I have spent years working on behalf of victims of sexual abuse and exploitation. We fear the dark alley, the idea of the perpetrator there with a gun or a knife, but it is this type of man that steals innocence. It is this man, not worthy of the position of trust, much less power. This is the man that stains the institution so many of us honor. And this is the man that has left us with no choice to take the vote that we have to take today.
The chair recognizes Mr. Murr.
The members of the General Investigating Committee have laid out the complaint process, the facts, and the arguments in this matter. They are compelling. And as stated clearly in the committee's report, the findings of fact are supported by independent and credible evidence. They are uncontroverted and unrefuted. To summarize, we found that Representative Slaton violated the House drug and alcohol policy by offering and providing alcohol to a minor, violated the appropriate workplace conduct policy by failing to abstain from harassment and other forms of inappropriate workplace conduct, violated the House rules by failing to report harassment in the workplace, violated multiple criminal offenses under Texas law, including the offense of furnishing alcohol to a minor, unlawful employment practice under the Labor Code, the offenses of abuse of official capacity and official oppression. As a member of the House of Representatives, he engaged in disorderly conduct under Section 11, Article 3 of the Texas Constitution. As a member of the House of Representatives, his conduct does not meet the minimum standards of conduct expected of a member. In sum, when all of these violations of policy and rules and law are viewed collectively and together, Representative Slaton has engaged in conduct unbecoming a member. No one in this chamber disagrees that this conduct was wrong. We all agree that it cannot and will not be tolerated. The housekeeping resolution and our committee rules require our committee to recommend discipline under these circumstances. Our bipartisan committee carefully and seriously considered all forms of discipline, and we unanimously recommend expulsion from the House. Now, some of you have wondered if a different level of punishment might be warranted. After hearing from Representative Spiller and Vice Chair Johnson, no one can conclude that we should simply levy a fine and be done. To do so would undercut everything that this complaint process with an independent investigation model stands for. Likewise, a piece of paper that says, "Don't do that," in effect a censure, just doesn't cut it. This Texas House is not going to hear from multiple complainants about serious and alarming facts and then casually turn the other cheek by slapping a member on the hand. Unfortunately, our rules and our laws in Texas, steeped in decades of tradition and practice, do not allow for a member to be punished in other ways, like being removed from committees, stripped of salary or seniority, or other practices that you sometimes hear about in other states or in United States Congress. So we arrive at expulsion. Section 11, Article 3 of the Texas Constitution states, each House may determine the rules of its own proceedings, punish members for disorderly conduct, and, with the consent of 2/3, expel a member. This provision is modeled on almost identical expulsion language in the United States Constitution. To quote a legal resource on the act of expulsion, the underlying justification for legislative discipline has traditionally been to protect the integrity and dignity of the legislature and its proceedings, rather than to merely punish an individual. Our Constitution does not determine what conduct warrants expulsion. There is no requirement that it be for a violation of criminal law. It is for conduct in which the judgment of the body finds that is inconsistent with the trust and duty of a member. Expulsion is rare. It occurs infrequently. Why? Because in most instances, members do resign from office, especially before a matter gets this far. You understand that, and I understand that. This investigation started with 3 complaints more than a month ago. Representative Slaton was provided timely copies of those complaints. He was afforded a due process hearing, all under the blanket of confidentiality. He had many opportunities to consider different outcomes. Finally, one day before today's resolution, Representative tendered a written resignation. Now, some of you have asked, does this mean that we don't need to consider expulsion? Our committee has provided you today on your desk with a detailed memo explaining that a member who has resigned is still a holdover in office until a successor is qualified. That's in the Texas Constitution. Right now, this means that Representative Slaton continues to receive his salary, continues to receive his constitutional per diem, continues to be entitled to receive reimbursement for expenses, continues to serve on committees, and continues to count as a member of this body for quorum and other purposes. Most disappointingly, the letter of resignation from yesterday shows no remorse. It contains no apology to those involved or to any of you. At no point in the last month has he ever demonstrated remorse or appeared apologetic in any way. Now, I've had the privilege of serving as a judge, and I've also represented defendants in court proceedings. Many of the laws that we mete out in this state allow us to consider a wrongdoer's acknowledgement that mistakes were made, that poor judgment was used, and that people may have been hurt. My experience has always been that leniency may be granted when one expresses regret, because each and every one of us is human and fallible. There is no apology here. No remorse. Resignation does not escape the need for this body to consider expulsion today. Members, this recommendation is not easy. There are no high fives, and it is not driven by politics. It is about the integrity of the House and the discredit reflected upon this institution. Hours upon hours, our committee members have toiled because you have asked us to do that. It is a decision that we did not arrive at lightly. After our committee report was printed and published Saturday, and our recommendation for discipline was made public to you, I received numerous notes from people, some anonymous, some from people that I know very well. All say something similar. I will read you one. Thank you for all the difficult and important work you are doing. I started working at the Capitol when I was 20. I worked for wonderful members who always looked out for me and made sure I was safe, but not everyone was so fortunate. Today, things changed in a way none of us ever thought they would. Members, at times during this process, I have wept. I have cried for all those involved, including Mr. Slaton and his family. I have cried for witnesses. I have cried for the institution that I cherish. I have cried because I have the duty and responsibility to stand before you today and ask you to take this vote. My heart breaks. I suspect that yours does too. In thinking of this body and of Representative Slaton, I am reminded of a verse from Psalm 34. The Lord is close to the brokenhearted and saves those who are crushed in spirit. Members, I respectfully ask you to vote in favor of this resolution.
Does any member wish to speak against the resolution? The chair recognizes Mr. Murr to close on the resolution.
Mr. Speaker, members, I move adoption.
The question occurs on the adoption of the resolution. This is a record vote required by the Constitution. The clerk will ring the bell. Chair, Ms. Johnson of Harris voting aye, Mr. Spiller voting aye, Mr. Longoria voting aye, Mr. Guerin voting aye, Mr. Murr voting aye. Show the speaker voting aye. Have all members voted? There have been 147 ayes and 0 nays. The resolution is adopted. The chair directs the Sergeant at Arms to bar the former member from the chamber. The chair directs the chief clerk to strike the former member's name from the roster of members and to notify the governor of the House's actions. The chair directs the voting clerk to strike the former member's name from the board. The chair directs the doorkeeper to remove the nameplate from the former member's desk. The House will stand at ease pending the completion of these directions.